The wind howled like a living thing, clawing at the frozen edges of Creston County, Montana, where the night swallowed everything but the snow. Sheriff Robert Harland gripped the steering wheel of his patrol truck, his knuckles pale against the leather. 23 years on the job had taught him to face the worst grisly maulings. Domestic disputes turned deadly, meth labs hidden in the wilderness, but nothing felt as wrong as this call. Just past midnight, February 2018, a motorist had reported headlights veering off Route 12 near the Blackwood property, 40 miles from town. The storm was a beast, spitting ice and snow, daring him to step into its jaws. Harland's radio crackled, the dispatcher's voice faint. "Sheriff, you sure you don't want Collins to back you up?" He shook his head, though no one could. "See, I'm closer. I'll handle it." The words felt heavy, like a vow he might regret. The Blackwood property was a ghost of its former self, a crumbling farmhouse and sagging outbuildings abandoned a decade ago after the owners lost everything to debt. Local teens used it for parties, sneaking through its broken windows with cheap beer and bravado. But Harland had chased them off enough times to know the place was empty tonight. With temperatures plunging to 15 below and visibility choked by snow, no one would be out here by choice. Or so he told himself, ignoring the prickle at the base of his skull. Route 12 was a desolate stretch, flanked by pines that loomed like silent sentinels. His headlights carved a weak path through the blizzard, the wipers struggling against the onslaught. When he turned onto the unmarked access road, his beams caught something fresh: tire tracks, sharp and deep, cutting through the snow like a wound. Harland slowed, his breath clouding in the cab. The tracks were no more than an hour old, leading toward the property. Someone was here, and they weren't supposed to be. He followed them cautiously, the truck lurching over ruts frozen solid. 100 yards in, he saw it, a silver sedan. Its front end crumpled against a pine, half hidden by a stand of trees. The driver's door hung open, snow piling on the seats. The interior dark and lifeless. No one inside. No one anywhere. Harland radioed his position and the car's license plate, then grabbed his flashlight and service weapon. The wind hit him like a fist as he stepped out, slicing through his sheriff's jacket, stinging his face. He swept a flashlight beam across the snow and froze. A single set of footprints staggered away from the car, uneven, as if the person was limping, dragging one leg. They led straight toward the farmhouse. The house loomed ahead, a decaying silhouette against the storm. Its boarded windows stared like blind eyes, the roof sagging under years of neglect. Harland's boots crunched through the snow, each step louder than it should have been in the muffled night. The footprints grew clearer as he approached, and with them came a smell faint at first, then stronger, metallic and raw, like blood left to pool on a slaughterhouse floor. His stomach twisted, but he kept moving, because stopping wasn't an option. The front door was ajar, swaying slightly in the wind, its hinges groaning. Harland raised his flashlight, the beam trembling despite his steady hand. "Sheriff's Department," he called, his voice swallowed by the storm. "Anyone in here? I'm here to help." Silence answered, heavy and wrong, as if the house itself was holding its breath. Inside, the air was nearly as cold as outside, thick with the musty stench of rot and that same metallic tamp's. Harland's flashlight cut through the darkness, revealing a foyer coated in dust. The floorboards warped and splintered. The footprints were unmistakable now, smeared across the wood, but they weren't alone. Other tracks crisscrossed the space, some fresh, others caked with grime, as if people had been coming and going for days, maybe weeks. This place was supposed to be empty. Why were there so many tracks? His heart thudded, a steady drumbeat against the silence. He moved deeper, checking each room. Peeling wallpaper hung in strips, exposing mold-blackened walls. Broken furniture lay scattered, remnants of a life long gone. But the footprints kept going, leading to a staircase that vanished into the dark. His radio crackled, shattering the Quiet, and he flinched. "Sheriff, dispatch here," the voice said, tinny and distant. "That vehicle's registered to Daniel Morrow, reported missing 3 weeks ago from Billings." Harlan's grip tightened on the radio. 3 weeks. The tire tracks were fresh. Someone had driven that car here tonight. "Copy that," he said, keeping his voice low. "Send backup. Possible connection to a missing person." The dispatcher warned him the nearest units were 40 minutes out, maybe more in this weather. Harlan knew he should wait, but the thought of someone bleeding out upstairs, freezing in the dark, pushed him forward. You don't leave someone to die, not on your watch. He started up the stairs, each step creaking under his weight, the sound echoing like a warning. The second floor. Hallway stretched into shadow, 4 doorways branching off like the ribs of a skeleton. A faint light flickered from the last room on the right, weak and unsteady, like a candle fighting to stay lit. The metallic smell grew sharper, coating his throat, and Harlan's pulse quickened. Something was wrong here, more wrong than he could name. He moved toward the light, his flashlight beam dancing across the walls, catching glimpses of cracked plaster and cobwebs. The door to the lit room was half open, and he nudged it wider with his boot, gun raised. "Sheriff's Department," he said, louder now. "Show yourself." The room was bare except for a single wooden chair in the center, facing away from him. Around it, dozens of candles burned in a perfect circle, their flames trembling in the draft from a broken window. The air felt alive, heavy with intent, as if the room was watching him. On the chair sat a police scanner, its dials glowing faintly, whispering patrol updates in a voice Harlan knew too well his own department's frequency. But it was the walls that stopped his breath. Every inch was covered in photographs, hundreds of them, pinned and taped in a chaotic mosaic. His face stared back at him, Robert Harlan on patrol, buying coffee, mowing his lawn, sleeping in his bed. Interspersed were images of others he recognized, strangers he didn't, some with faces circled in red. He knew those faces, missing persons reports that had haunted his desk for years. His knees buckled, but he caught himself, the world tilting. In the center of one wall hung a county map, marked with red X's, the Blackwood property circled again and again in what looked like dried blood. Before he could move, a floorboard creaked behind him. Harlan spun, but pain exploded through his shoulder as something heavy struck him. His gun clattered across the floor, and he stumbled, clutching his arm. A figure loomed in the doorway, tall and broad, face hidden in shadow. "Been waiting for you, Sheriff," the voice said, low and familiar, like a memory Harlan couldn't place. "Thought the storm might keep you away, but you're predictable. Always rushing to save the day." The figure stepped into the candlelight, and Harlan's blood turned to ice. Carter Walsh, a deputy he'd fired years ago for brutality, stood before him, a hunting knife gleaming in his hand. The room seemed to shrink, the walls closing in. Every photo a scream of accusation. Walsh gestured to the photos, his smile twisted. "This is what happens when you ruin a man's life. I've been watching you, planning how to end you." Harlan's mind raced, piecing together fragments. Walsh knew his routines, his cabin 5 miles away, details no one should know. He'd been hunted, studied, like prey. Harlan lunged for his gun, but Walsh was faster, kicking it away. The knife flashed, slicing through Harlan's jacket, grazing his chest. Pain seared, but he rolled, grabbing a candlestick and swinging it hard. It connected with Walsh's temple, and the former deputy staggered, giving Harlan a chance to scramble for his weapon. The candles flickered, casting shadows that danced like demons. Walsh charged, knife raised, and Harlan fired twice. The shots echoed, deafening in the small room, and Walsh collapsed, blood pooling beneath him. Harlan handcuffed the unconscious man, his hands shaking, and radioed for help. As he waited, he studied the walls, finding plans for abductions, lists of targets, including his own family. The storm raged outside, but the real terror was here, in this house, in the mind of a man he'd once trusted. The photos seemed to watch him, their eyes accusing, demanding he remember. The investigation that followed uncovered Walsh's hideout in the farmhouse's storm cellar, linking him to 7 disappearances across 3 counties. The sedan had been stolen from his latest victim, crashed to lure Harland into a trap. Years later, Harland still checks his rearview mirror when passing abandoned properties. He never works alone anymore, no matter how small the call. The storm never left him, its howl echoing in his dreams, a reminder of how close he came to becoming another face on that wall. The weight of Walsh's victims presses on him, a burden he carries to their families each year. Knowing the predator who wore his badge was stopped, but wondering how many others might still be watching, waiting just beyond the light. The Arizona desert doesn't forgive. Its silence hides truths too heavy for most men to bear. When Sheriff Lucas Merritt answered a hiker's panicked call about an abandoned campsite in Hidden Valley, he thought he'd find answers. Instead, he unearthed a horror that would stalk him long after the dust settled. Pinewood County, Arizona, in the summer of 2002, was a land of scorched earth and stubborn survival. Sheriff Lucas Merritt, 52, stood as its guardian. His salt and pepper hair, a testament to 17 years of facing down the county's troubles. His face, weathered by the southwestern sun, bore lines of a man who'd seen too much, yet refused to flinch. Pinewood's 4,000 square miles of mesas, canyons, and dust-held small towns where life moved slow. But Merritt knew the desert kept secrets. Years ago, a young couple had vanished near Hidden Valley, their car found with doors open, as if they'd fled something unseen. That case, unsolved, lingered in his mind like a faint scar. Feel the weight of that memory, the way it stirred when his radio crackled at 2 p.m. on July 12th. A hiker's voice trembling with fear. The hiker, breathless, reported a deserted campsite deep in Hidden Valley, 40 miles from the county seat. Wallets, clothes, and IDs lay scattered, abandoned in a rush. Merritt's chest tightened, the air in his office suddenly stale, despite the worry fan. Hidden Valley wasn't a place for amateurs. Its narrow canyon, flanked by cliffs that seemed to lean inward, was a maze for climbers, not tourists. He grabbed his hat, its brim frayed from years of shielding his eyes, and told dispatch he'd go alone. Step into his boots, feel the truck's engine rumble as he drove into the unknown, the desert stretching endless and indifferent. The road to Hidden Valley was a punishing hour, pavement giving way to ruts that jolted his truck. Heat shimmered off the ground, the air thick with the scent of baked earth and creosote. Merritt's mind drifted to that missing couple from '95, their faces on faded posters. Had they wandered into the valley's jaws? The cliffs loomed closer, their shadows shifting like living things. He parked at the trailhead, his boots crunching gravel, and began the 3-mile hike. Sweat soaked his shirt, the sun a relentless hammer. The silence was unnatural. No birds, no wind, just a low hum, like the earth itself was breathing. Sensed the wrongness, the way it clung to his skin as he approached the coordinates. The campsite was a tableau of dread. A 2-person tent sagged, its fabric torn as if clawed in panic. Cooking gear sat by a cold fire pit, eerily orderly. A cooler lid ajar, reeked of spoiled meat, the stench curling into Merritt's throat. Clothes, boots, and backpacks were strewn in a wide arc, as if hurled during a desperate flight. He knelt, fingers brushing a wallet half buried in dust. Inside an ID, Dr. Alan Reeves, geology professor, University of Arizona. A purse nearby held another, Dr. Catherine Langley, same department. Dispatch confirmed they'd been missing 3 days, last seen on a research trip. Feel the chill, the realization that this wasn't abandonment, but a crime, etched in the desert's cruel silence. Footprints scarred the dirt. A chaotic dance that resolved into a single trail leading to the canyon wall. Merritt followed, his flashlight cutting through dusk's creeping shadows. The tracks ended at a solid rock face, unyielding under his touch. His heart pounded as he traced a faint seam, a crack betraying a camouflage door crafted from local stone. It blended so perfectly that only a whisper of dust revealed its edge. Push deeper, he urged himself, prying it open. Cool air rushed out, laced with a chemical tang that burned his nostrils, sharp and unnatural. Protocol demanded backup, but with deputies an hour away and lives at stake, Merritt drew his gun and stepped into the dark. The tunnel was a marvel of intent, 6 feet high, 4 feet wide, its walls hewn with precision. The chemical odor intensified, mingling with a metallic note, like blood left to rust. Merritt's flashlight danced across the stone, his steps echoing in the confined space. Memories of another case surfaced. A drifter found dead in a canyon, his body riddled with strange punctures, ruled an accident, despite Merritt's doubts. Was this connected? The tunnel stretched on, oppressive, the air growing heavier. 50 yards in, it opened into a chamber that froze his blood. Tables lined the walls, cluttered with microscopes, centrifuges, and vials of murky liquids. Computer monitors glowed, casting cold light on geological maps and chemical formulas. To examination, tables stood in the center, their leather restraints stained with dark smears. See the horror, the sterile cruelty of a place where science had turned predator. Merritt's breath caught, his mind flashing to a case from his early years. A lab in Tucson, raided for illegal experiments, its subjects never found. The parallels were too stark, too terrifying. His voice, steady despite fear, called out, "Sheriff's Department, anyone here?" The words echoed, unanswered, but a faint moan drifted from deeper within. Gun raised, he followed it, the air colder, thicker, with that chemical stench. A second chamber revealed Dr. Reeves and Dr. Langley, strapped to metal cots. Their bodies were gaunt, skin sallow, arms dotted with injection marks. Langley's eyes were half open, unseeing, while Reeves twitched, muttering about a breakthrough that would change everything. Feel their pain, the violation etched in their hollow faces. Merritt's hands shook as he cut their restraints, his mind screaming with questions. Who did this? Why? As he radioed for evac, an engine roared outside. Impossible in this remote canyon. He sprinted through the tunnel, emerging to see a dust cloud rising from a hidden track. Someone had fled, leaving him with victims but no answers. He returned to the professors, wrapping them in his jacket, their skin clammy, pulses weak. The rescue team took 3 hours, their faces grim as they navigated the treacherous terrain. Reeves and Langley were airlifted, but the nightmare was just beginning. The investigation uncovered a horror beyond comprehension. The lab had operated for 2 years, run by a group called the Pioneers, who experimented with a rare mineral unique to Hidden Valley. Journals from the computers detailed compounds with military applications, tested on human subjects. Reeves and Langley had been targeted for their research, lured to the valley, and intercepted before publishing their findings. Medical logs hinted at other victims, their fates unknown, their names erased. The lab was sanitized before a full forensic sweep, leaving only echoes of its purpose. Vehicle tracks led to a highway and vanished. Merritt became consumed, the lab's sterile cruelty haunting his dreams. He spent nights in his office, files spread like a map to hell, the chemical odor still vivid in his memory. He interviewed locals, chasing whispers of strange vehicles seen near the valley years ago. One old rancher, eyes shadowed, spoke of men in suits visiting in the 90s, offering cash for silence about government work. The trail grew colder, the Pioneers, a phantom too vast to touch. 3 years later, Merritt followed a lead to an abandoned ranch, hoping for answers. Instead, he received an anonymous envelope. Inside, A photograph of him and his wife on their porch, taken days earlier. "Stop looking," it screamed, a threat from a force beyond his reach. His hands trembled, the image burning into his mind. A family to protect. He stepped back, but the case clung to him like dust. He moved twice, installed cameras, kept a shotgun by his bed. Hidden Valley became a wound, a reminder of truths too dangerous to chase. In 2004, a fire razed the lab, erasing evidence. The case remains open, but inactive, a ghost in Pinewoods records. Merritt retired in 2009, but he never stopped collecting fragments about the pioneers. He entrusted files to journalists, a shield against the shadows. Last year, a stranger approached him in a diner, an old man with trembling hands. "They're still out there," he whispered, eyes darting. "The valley knows." He left before Merritt could ask more, his words a knife in the sheriff's gut. Feel Merritt's fear, the weight of knowing something watches, waiting in the desert's silence. Hidden Valley stands unchanged, its cliffs guarding secrets no one dares seek. Merritt, now gray and weary, drives past it sometimes, his eyes scanning the horizon. He wonders how deep the pioneers' reach extends, what they built in that buried chamber, and whether the desert will ever surrender its truth. January 1997, Clearwater County, Minnesota, where the cold doesn't just bite, it claws into your bones, freezes your breath in your throat, and whispers warnings you can't quite hear. On a night when the mercury plunged to -28, Sheriff Dale Erickson sat in his patrol car, the heater struggling against the frost creeping across the windshield. At 48, with 2 decades patrolling the county's frozen lakes and endless forests, he'd seen the worst of what rural Minnesota could unleash: blizzards that buried homes, accidents that left families shattered, but nothing could have prepared him for what waited at the Halverson property, a place where the earth itself seemed to hold its breath, guarding secrets too dark to unearth. The radio crackled, cutting through the hum of the engine. "Sheriff, you still out on County Road 7? Dispatch's voice was faint, swallowed by static. Erickson adjusted the knob, his gloved fingers stiff from the cold. "Just finishing my loop," he replied, his breath fogging the air. "All clear, passing the old Halverson place. Heading back in 10. The Halverson property was a ghost of its former self, a dairy farm abandoned in the 1980s after bankruptcy left its owners broken. The house stood 100 yards from the road, its sagging roof and empty windows barely visible through skeletal oaks. Most nights, it was just another landmark on Erickson's patrol, a forgotten relic swallowed by snow. But tonight, something was different. A flicker of light, pale and unsteady, pulsed from the house's upper floor, like a heartbeat in the dark. Erickson slowed the car, his eyes narrowing. Kids sneaking in for a dare, hunters taking shelter. In this cold, neither seemed likely. He grabbed the radio. "Hold on, dispatch. Seeing some lights at the Halverson place. Going to check it out." The response was cautious. "Copy, Sheriff. Need backup." Erickson hesitated, the weight of 20 years telling him to play it safe. But the light flickered again, fragile, almost pleading. "Negative," he said. "Probably just kids. Won't be long." He pulled onto the snow-choked drive, tires crunching through the crust. The house loomed closer, its boarded windows, like eyes sealed shut, refusing to see. Erickson stepped out, the cold slamming into him, sharp as a blade. His flashlight beam cut through the swirling snow, revealing the house's peeling paint and splintered porch. The light upstairs was gone now, but the silence felt wrong, too heavy, too deliberate, as if the night itself was listening. He scanned the ground and froze. A single set of footprints, fresh and deep, led from the drive toward the house, then vanished halfway, as if the person had been plucked from the earth. Erickson's pulse quickened. He followed the tracks, his boots sinking into the snow, each step louder in the suffocating quiet. The footprints were uneven, suggesting a limp, but they stopped abruptly, leaving no trace beyond a faint scuff in the snow. He swept his flashlight wider, expecting to find more tracks. A struggle, anything, nothing, just the house, staring back, its front door slightly ajar, a sliver of darkness beckoning. "Sheriff's Department," he called, his voice swallowed by the wind. "Anyone in there? I'm here to help." No answer came, only the groan of the house settling under the weight of the storm. He pushed the door open, the hinges protesting with a low moan. The air inside was frigid, thick with the stench of mildew and something sharper coppery like old blood. His flashlight revealed a foyer coated in dust, the floorboards scarred by time, but the footprints were back, crisscrossing the entryway, some fresh, others faded, as if the house had been a silent stage for countless visitors. Who had been here, and why, in a place so far from anywhere? Erickson's hand rested on his service weapon, the familiar weight grounding him as he moved deeper, the beam of his light dancing across peeling wallpaper and broken furniture. The first floor was empty, a maze of abandoned rooms that smelled of neglect. The footprints led to a staircase, its steps warped and treacherous. Erickson paused, his radio crackling faintly. "Sheriff, you there?" Dispatch's voice was laced with worry. "Checking the Halverson place," he whispered, keeping his voice low. "Send backup, just in case. I'm heading upstairs." The response was garbled, lost in static, but he couldn't wait. If someone was hurt, freezing in this weather, every second mattered. He climbed the stairs, each step groaning under his weight, the darkness above seeming to pulse with a life of its own. The second floor was a narrow hallway, 4 doorways branching off into shadow. A faint glow spilled from the last room on the right, the same light he'd seen from the road. The coppery smell grew stronger, now mixed with something electric, like the air after a lightning strike. Erickson's grip tightened on his gun as he approached, his heart pounding against the silence. "Sheriff's Department," he called again, louder, his voice echoing. "Show yourself." The door was half open, and he nudged it wider with his boot, stepping into a room that made his blood run colder than the January night. A single chair sat in the center, surrounded by a perfect circle of candles, their flames flickering in the draft from a shattered window. On the chair was a police radio, identical to the one in Erickson's car, quietly broadcasting patrol updates. But it was the walls that stole his breath. Hundreds of photographs, pinned and taped, covered every inch images of Erickson himself. Erickson on patrol, Erickson at the diner, Erickson asleep in his own bed, the camera peering through his window. Mixed among them were photos of strangers, some with faces circled in red, others marked with dates that matched missing persons reports. A county map hung on one wall, its surface scarred with red lines. The Halverson property circled in what looked like dried blood. This wasn't a hideout. It was a shrine to obsession, a map of someone's descent into madness. Erickson's mind raced, piecing together the impossible. Someone had been watching him, studying him, for months, maybe years. But who? And why? Here, in this forgotten place? He stepped closer to the map, his flashlight trembling, when a floorboard creaked behind him. He spun, but the world blurred as something heavy struck his shoulder, sending his gun skittering across the floor. Pain seared through his arm, and he stumbled, catching a glimpse of a figure in the doorway, tall, shadowed, moving with unnatural purpose. "You're late, Sheriff," the voice said, low and familiar, though Erickson couldn't place it. "I thought the storm would keep you away, but you're too predictable. Always checking the lonely places." The figure stepped into the candlelight, revealing a face Erickson hadn't seen in years, a former deputy. Long gone from the department, his eyes burning with a hatred that had festered in the dark. "You took everything from me," the man hissed, a knife glinting in his hand. "Now it's your turn to disappear." What followed was a desperate struggle, Erickson's injured arm slowing him as he dodged the blade. The room a chaos of shadows and candlelight. He grabbed a candlestick, swinging it with all his strength, the impact sending the man staggering. Erickson lunged for his gun, firing twice as the figure charged again. The shots echoed, and the man collapsed, blood pooling on the dusty floor. Erickson cuffed him, his hands shaking, and radioed for help, his voice hoarse. Suspect down. Need medical and backup at Halverson, now. But the house wasn't done with its secrets. While waiting for help, Erickson explored further, driven by a need to understand. In the basement, behind a false wall, he found a trapdoor leading to a storm cellar. The air below was damp, heavy with the same coppery stench. His flashlight revealed crates of supplies, maps, and journals detailing abductions, each entry colder than the last. The man upstairs hadn't acted alone. Others had come here, drawn by promises or threats, their names scrawled in fading ink. Then he saw it, a narrow tunnel branching off the cellar, its walls rough and uneven, descending into the earth. Something about it felt alive, as if the darkness was watching him back. Erickson hesitated, his training screaming to wait for backup. But the tunnel called to him, a whisper of answers too urgent to ignore. He stepped inside, the air growing colder, the smell of ozone and metal overwhelming. The passage twisted, narrowing until he had to crouch, his flashlight flickering as if the batteries were dying. After 50 yards, the tunnel opened into a chamber, its walls glistening with moisture. A faint blue light pulsed at the far end, rhythmic, like a heartbeat. Erickson's breath caught as he approached. The light revealing shapes moving in the shadows, not human, not animal, but something else, their forms shifting like liquid. "Sheriff's Department," he whispered, his voice trembling. "Identify yourselves." The shapes paused, their movements synchronized, and the light flared, blinding him. When his vision cleared, they were closer, their presence pressing against his mind. A chorus of voices speaking in reverse, unintelligible yet filled with intent. "Run, Dale. Run now." The command came from within, not from the radio or the shapes, but from some primal instinct. Erickson stumbled back, dropping his flashlight, the blue light chasing him as he scrambled through the tunnel. He reached the cellar, slamming the trapdoor shut, his heart pounding so hard he thought it would burst. He radioed again, his voice breaking. "Seal this place off. There's something down here. Don't let anyone near it." Backup arrived an hour later, finding Erickson shaken but alive, the suspect still unconscious. The cellar was searched, revealing the tunnel, but no trace of the chamber or the light. The journals linked the suspect to 3 disappearances, but the tunnel's purpose remained a mystery. Days later, a team of geologists was called in, their equipment detecting a vast underground network beneath the county, unmapped and geologically impossible. They found Erickson's flashlight, gun, and a digital recorder, arranged in a perfect triangle on a rock, as if placed with care. The recorder held a single file, time-stamped 11:53 p.m. that night. Erickson's voice, tense and urgent, narrated his descent. Following a tunnel under Halverson, heard something in the cellar. Floor was open when I got here. Never knew this was down here. His breathing grew heavier, the air rung, like copper and ozone. Then, in a whisper, "There's light ahead. Blue, pulsing. Something's moving. Not human, not animal. I'm going to." The recording cut to a rush of air, a sound like voices speaking backward, and Erickson's final words, "They've seen me. God help me. They're coming. Seal this place. Whatever's here has been here forever. Keep it buried." His scream ended abruptly, not fading but stopping, as if the sound itself had been erased. The county sealed the tunnel with concrete, citing structural instability, but internal reports mentioned unexplained biological contaminants. The recorder's copies degraded into static within weeks, the original lost to corruption. Erickson was declared dead in 2004, his case open but inactive. The Halverson property was fenced off, the house demolished, yet the land remained untouched, a scar on the county's map. Years later, in 2015, scientists detected seismic anomalies beneath the site, rhythmic pulses every 28 days, like a heartbeat deep underground. Locals called it Erickson's Hole, a name whispered in diners and avoided on night drives. Even the bravest deputies detour around that stretch of County Road 7. Their radios crackling with static that almost sounds like a voice, begging to be heard. Sheriff Dale Erickson walked into the dark to protect his county. But what he found beneath Halverson wasn't a crime, it was something older, hungrier, and still waiting. In the heart of Red Pine County, where autumn leaves blanket forgotten secrets, a letter landed on Sheriff Thomas Keller's desk, silent scream from a past no one dared to face. What it unleashed was a nightmare that turned his own badge into a mirror of betrayal. The autumn of 2009 cloaked Red Pine County, Wisconsin, in a chill that seeped into its 17,000 souls scattered across dense forests and small farms. Sheriff Thomas Keller, 41, was a man forged by this land. His military police days had ended with an honorable return, followed by a rise through the sheriff's department, where he earned respect for his steady resolve. His office, a cramped space in the station, smelled of stale coffee and the faint resin of pine logs stacked outside. The walls held framed commendations, but one case haunted him. Miranda Collins, a 19-year-old college student who vanished 3 years ago during Thanksgiving break. Her disappearance had sparked a frantic search, her family's pleas echoing in his mind, yet the trail died in the woods. Feel the weight of that silence? The way it pressed on him as he shuffled through paperwork on that cold Monday, October 12th. Among the mundane reports, a plain white envelope stood out, his name typed in stark black ink. No return address, no postmark. It hadn't come through the mail. His fingers paused, a shiver tracing his spine, as if the room itself held its breath. Inside, a single sheet bore typed words that pierced the quiet. Sheriff Keller, I know what happened to Miranda Collins. I saw everything. Check the old processing plant at the north end of Ridge Road, storage room B, behind the broken compressor. You won't find Miranda, but you'll find proof. I can't come forward. He knows who I am, a concerned citizen. Read those words again. Let their dread sink in, the promise of truth wrapped in terror. Keller's chest tightened. Miranda's case had left scars, her mother's tear-streaked face, the empty fields searched in vain. The processing plant, abandoned since 2001, had been scoured back then, yielding nothing but rust and shadows. He called deputies Mark Hensley and Sarah Voss, their faces tense as he shared the letter, swearing them to secrecy. The station felt smaller, its familiar creaks now a reminder of unseen eyes. By afternoon, they drove to the plant, the air thick with mildew and the sour temps of decay. The building loomed, its walls sagging, windows shattered like broken teeth. Inside, they navigated debris-strewn halls, the silence broken only by their boots on cracked concrete. Storage room B was buried deep, its door warped, the broken compressor, a rusted monolith against the wall. Behind it, a loose panel gave way, revealing a plastic bag. Inside, Miranda's driver's license, her silver bracelet tits clasp still warm from memory, and a man's wristwatch inscribed, to Robert, with pride, Dad. 1997. See the glint of that bracelet, the proof of a life stolen, now cold. In Keller's trembling hands, the watch led to Robert Tillman, a 44-year-old mechanic who'd fixed the Collins plumbing months before Miranda vanished. Keller's team raided Tillman's home, the garage reeking of oil and neglect. Microscopic blood traces in an old car's trunk matched Miranda's DNA. Tillman was arrested, his protests hollow, his lawyer pointing to the letter's mystery author. Keller's mind raced. Who knew this much? The station's air grew heavier, the hum of fluorescent lights, a mocking pulse. He recalled a farmer's tale from years ago. Strange lights near the plant, late at night, dismissed as drunks. Had someone watched then? Sensed the doubt, the way trust in his own team began to crack. A week later, another letter appeared on his desk. Its arrival, a ghost slipping through locked doors. Good work, Sheriff. 1 found, 3 to go. Whitford Park, the old well. You have until Friday. The words hit like a blow. 3 more. Keller mobilized search teams, their boots crunching through Whitford Park's fallen leaves. No well marked any map, but on day 2, dogs led them to an overgrown corner. A stone well, hidden by decades of vines, lay beneath plywood. At its bottom, 15 feet down, bones gleamed in the flashlight's beam. Forensics identified Eliza Watt, 22, missing since 2001, once thought a runaway. Feel her absence, the years erased. Her story a whisper in the dark. Before Eliza's name was confirmed, a 3rd letter arrived, its precision chilling. To Down, Sheriff. Your county has forgotten too many. Logging road off Highway 16, mile. Marker 34. The clearing with the lightning-struck pine, 6 feet down. You won't believe who put her there. Clocks ticking. Keller's stomach churned. The letters weren't mailed. Someone was inside. State police joined, their presence a cold comfort. The logging road search uncovered older remains. Carol Masterson, a bank teller, moved away in 1998. Her postcards forged by an unseen hand. Keller ordered a review of missing persons files, his mind drifting to Garrett, his mentor, who'd guided him into this role. Had those steady eyes hidden something? Feel his isolation? The creeping suspicion that the enemy wore a familiar face. Security cameras were installed, their red lights a futile guard. Yet the 4th letter appeared. Last one, Sheriff. She's the one that started it all. Harrison, Quarry, North Face, behind the fallen rocks. I've given you justice for 4 forgotten souls. Now look at your own department. The monster wore a badge. The Quarry, abandoned since the 1970s, held Patricia Donahue's remains. Missing since 1997, labeled a runaway. The accusation a monster within shattered Keller. He stepped back, letting state investigators probe his team. Soil from Patricia's grave contained police boot polish, linking all scenes. Records pointed to William Garrett, his mentor, retired after 27 years. Searching Garrett's rural property, investigators found a locked workshop, its air stale with secrets. A hidden safe held trophies. Miranda's ID, Carol's house key, Eliza's hair. Garrett, 67, showed no remorse, saying, "This county needed a protector." Sometimes that means removing threats. His files revealed a pattern. Each victim had filed complaints stalking, assault that Garrett buried, targeting them as troublemakers. See his cold gaze, the man Keller trusted, now a predator unmasked. Keller remembered late nights, with Garrett, sharing whiskey, the older man's stories of cleaning up the county. Had those been confessions? 3 months later, a 5th letter arrived at Keller's home. Its words a final confession. Sheriff Keller, justice is served. William Garrett took my daughter Patricia in 1997. I suspected him, but no one listened to a grieving mother's intuition. I spent years following him, learning his secrets. I couldn't save her, but I ensured he paid. My work is done. Margaret Donahue. Margaret, Patricia's mother, died in 2007. Her journals detailing her shadow investigation. Keller met her sister, a frail woman with haunted eyes. Margaret trusted someone, she whispered, but I don't know who. The letter's handwriting wasn't Marguerite's, another hand carried her mission. The shadow still lurking. Keller reformed the department, mandating case reviews and evidence protocols. He was re-elected thrice, retiring in 2021, but the case left scars. He saw Garrett's face in every shadow, wondering who else knew, and stayed silent. One night, a stranger approached him at a diner, voice low. "You didn't catch them all." Before Keller could react, the man vanished into the fog. Feel his burden, the weight of a badge now tarnished, as Red Pine County grapples with. June 2013, Summit County, Colorado, where the mountains don't just loom, they watch. Their jagged peaks, guarding secrets older than the pines that cling to their slopes. On a night when thunder rolled like a warning and lightning split the sky, Sheriff Marcus Weldon gripped the wheel of his SUV, navigating the twisting roads of Pine Haven. At 42, with 15 years patrolling the rugged terrain, he'd faced avalanches, lost hikers, and storms that turned valleys into graves. But tonight, something in the air felt heavier than the rain. A presence that made the hairs on his neck stand despite the warmth of the heater. The radio hissed, alive with static, as if the storm itself was trying to speak. Weldon was finishing a routine check on elderly residents, their homes dark from a county-wide power outage, when the call came. "Sheriff, you need to get to the old fire tower on Black Ridge Peak." Nancy Carter's voice, usually steady, trembled through the static. "Someone's broadcasting up there." Weldon frowned, wiping rain from his brow. "Broadcasting what?" he asked, pulling onto a gravel road. Nancy's reply sent a chill down his spine. "It's a voice, Marcus. Distorted, but it sounds like someone calling for help. The text says it's coming from the tower's direction." The Black Ridge Fire Tower had been abandoned since 2001. Its skeletal frame perched at 10,000 feet, reachable only by a treacherous Forest Service road, built in the 1940s. It once guided rangers through wildfire seasons, but satellites had rendered it obsolete. Locals avoided it, whispering about its last watcher, Davis Colton, who died in a blaze sparked by lightning in 1976. Why would anyone be up there now, in a storm like this? Weldon's gut told him to wait for daylight, but the thought of someone stranded, freezing, pushed him forward. "I'm heading up," he radioed. "Keep search and rescue on standby, but don't send them unless I call." The ascent was brutal. Rain pounded the windshield, turning the road into a river of mud. Twice, the SUV skidded, tires clawing for traction as branches snapped under the wheels. Lightning illuminated the peaks, casting the tower's silhouette against the clouds like a lone sentinel. The higher Weldon climbed, the worse the radio static grew, a relentless hum that seemed to pulse with the storm. Beneath it, faint, but unmistakable, was a voicemail, desperate, repeating words he couldn't yet make out. His headlights caught the tower's base, a rusted metal staircase spiraling into the fog. No vehicles, no footprints, just the endless rain swallowing every trace of life. Weldon stepped out, the cold rain soaking through his jacket, his boots sinking into the muck. The tower groaned in the wind, its frame swaying as if alive. He grabbed his flashlight and service weapon, the weight of the gun steadying his nerves. "Nancy, I'm at the tower," he radioed, shouting over the storm. "Still picking up that signal," static answered, but the voice was clearer now, filtering through his radio like a ghost breaking free. "Mayday, Mayday, this is Firewatcher, Davis Colton. Tower's been struck. Fire's spreading below. Can anyone hear me?" Weldon froze, his breath catching. Davis Colton. The name stirred a memory from Department lore, a man burned alive decades ago. His final transmissions, haunting dispatchers. He shook it off, blaming the storm for the interference. The staircase creaked under his weight as he climbed, the metal slick and unsteady. Each step took him higher into the fog, the world below vanishing until only the tower remained, a skeletal cage against the sky. The static grew louder, the voice more insistent, as if sensing his approach. "Fires surrounding the tower. I'm trapped. Send help to Black Ridge, please." At the top, a hexagonal observation cabin waited, its windows dark except for a faint green glow seeping through the door. ajar and swaying in the wind. Weldon pushed it open, his flashlight sweeping the room. Dust coated the floor, undisturbed for years, yet a single desk held an ancient radio transmitter, its power light blazing despite the outage. The dials twitched, adjusting themselves, as if guided by an unseen hand. This wasn't possible. The tower had no power, no wiring, nothing to fuel this relic. Weldon's heart pounded as he stepped closer, the voice now clear, filling the room. "This is Sheriff Marcus Weldon," he said, his voice steady despite the fear clawing at him. "Is anyone here?" The radio hissed, then spoke, the voice cutting through like a blade. "Mayday, Davis Colton. The fire's everywhere. I can't get out. Can you hear me, Sheriff?" Weldon's hand trembled as he reached for his own radio. "Nancy, you getting this? Check the name, Davis Colton, former fire watcher." Static was his only reply, but the desk radio spoke again, its tone shifting, no longer pleading but direct, addressing him. "Sheriff Weldon, you're here. I've been broadcasting so long, no one listens. How does it know my name?" The question burned in Weldon's mind, his training warring with the impossible. Davis Colton died in 1976. His body recovered from the ashes, yet the voice was real, human, laced with terror and something else resolve. "What do you want?" Weldon asked, backing toward the door, his flashlight flickering. The air grew heavy, the temperature rising despite the storm outside. "Justice," the voice whispered, now seeming to come from the walls, the floor, the very air. "It wasn't lightning. They killed me. Check the South Ridge slope, the old survey marker. Dig there." The windows fogged, not with mist but with a thick, acrid smoke that shouldn't exist. The room felt smaller, the walls closing in, as the radio sparked, its light flaring green before going dark. The smoke vanished, the air cold again, leaving Weldon alone with his racing pulse. He descended the tower, the storm subsiding, each step a battle against the urge to run. Back at the station, he pulled the 1976 case file. Colton's death was ruled a lightning strike, his last transmissions describing flames engulfing the tower. The recordings were lost, sealed, or destroyed. But why would a dead man's voice reach out now, and why to me? 3 days later, Weldon returned with a geologist friend and ground-penetrating radar. At the South Ridge survey marker, they found an anomaly 3 feet down a metal box, rusted but intact, containing Colton's journal and a damaged audio recorder. The journal's final pages detailed Colton's discovery of illegal logging in protected forests, sanctioned by county officials. His last entry, dated the day he died, mentioned photos and a meeting with federal agents. Someone wanted him silenced, and they used fire to do it. Forensic analysis of Colton's exhumed remains found traces of an accelerant on his bones, fractures suggesting he was beaten before the blaze. The case was reopened, but the suspect's county commissioner, forest supervisor, and sheriff from 1976 were all dead. The statute of limitations had passed for most crimes, though murder lingered. Weldon's report cited an anonymous tip leading to the survey marker, omitting the voice, the smoke, the impossible radio. He couldn't explain it, not to himself, not to anyone. The tower remained a silent witness to storms that brought more than rain. Maintenance crews reported finding the same radio transmitter, dusty and unpowered, reappearing on the desk despite being removed. During thunderstorms, emergency frequencies in Summit County crackled with interference, voices faint but persistent, begging to be heard. Weldon retired in 2019, his career defined by that night. He keeps an old radio by his bed, tuned to the forgotten frequency, listening through the static for a voice that refuses to rest. Years later, a hiker found a charred page near Black Ridge Peak, its edges brittle, the words barely legible. "They burned me to hide the truth," it read, in Colton's handwriting. The page was dated June 2013. The night Weldon climbed the tower. Some truths don't die, no matter how deep you bury them. They wait, in the static, in the storm, for someone brave enough to listen. The heavens shattered over Sagebrush County, a deluge drowning the parched Pedro Auyo in secrets long buried. When Sheriff Elena Vasquez raced to a tourist's desperate cry, she stepped into a ritual carved into the Eartha killer's madness, waiting to be unveiled. August 2016 brought an unnatural upheaval to Sagebrush County, New Mexico, where 3,200 square miles of arid scrub and scattered pueblos had known only drought for years. Sheriff Elena Vasquez, 43, had served 6 years. Her skin bronzed by the relentless sun, her eyes sharp from a career built on persistence. The station, a low adobe structure, buzzed with the dry hum of cooling units, its walls adorned with maps tracing the county's desolate rivers and canyons. Vasquez had tamed bar fights and tracked lost cattle, but the rain that morning felt like a violation, sheets of water pounding a land unaccustomed to mercy. It swelled the Pedro Auyo, a seasonal trickle, into a muddy beast. She remembered a tale from her childhood, a shepherd vanishing near the Auyo decades ago. His flock found scattered, his body never recovered. Feel the unease, the way that memory stirred as her radio crackled at 9 a.m. with a tourist's frantic voice. Shattering the station's quiet, the call came from a hiker, his breath ragged, reporting human remains half buried in the Auyo's cracked bed, 20 miles west. Vasquez grabbed her hat, its brim worn from years under the sun, and sped out with Deputy Mark Sandoval. The rain had ceased, leaving the air heavy with the scent of wet sagebrush and the earthy temps of soaked soil. The Auyo lay before them, its banks fissured from years of thirst, now softened into a graveyard of mud. Sandoval's flashlight revealed bones arranged in a perfect circle, the skull centered, its hollow sockets staring skyward. Vasquez knelt, her knees sinking into the damp earth, her fingers trembling above the brittle remains. In 20 years of law enforcement, she'd never seen such deliberate placement, almost sacred, yet dripping with dread. See the precision, the way the bones caught the fading light, a silent scream etched into the desert. Forensics later confirmed, a man in his 30s, dead 5 to 7 years, killed by a gunshot to the back of the head. His hands were gone, severed post-mortem. The stumps, a grotesque puzzle that haunted her sleep. 2 weeks later, the county trembled with a second find. 8 miles downstream, another circle of bones emerged from the mud, older by 8 to 10 years, also executed with hands removed. The sparse towns buzzed with whisper serial killers, cult-drawing media vans from Albuquerque, their lights piercing the night. Vasquez formed a task force with state police and FBI, their presence a stark intrusion on the desert's solitude. Facial reconstructions identified the first as Miguel Hernandez, a farm worker missing since 2010, his family's quiet grief now a public wound. The second victim remained a shadow. Feel the tension, the weight of a community's eyes, as Vasquez pored over maps, the paper crinkling under her restless fingers. She recalled a hiker lost 5 years ago near the Auyo, his gear found, but no trace of him, another unsolved riddle. Then came a breakthrough. Thomas Rhee, a retired geologist, called after seeing the second victim's reconstruction. He'd met the man, an amateur prospector, and offered photos of the Auyo's rock formations. The photos unveiled a chilling design. Each body lay where the Auyo widened into pools during rains, their aerial shapes forming near-perfect circles, visible only when water filled them. Vasquez's pulse quickened. The killer wasn't crafting the circles. He was mirroring nature's blueprint, a pattern only the sky could judge. Satellite imagery marked 5 such sites. 3 had been searched, but after another downpour, the 4th yielded a 3rd victim recent, 3 years old. DNA matched Daniel Coington, a geology grad student missing since 2013. His notes, found in an abandoned camp, detailed the Aoyo's circular pools, mentioning a surveyor's unsettling interest in his aerial photos. Sense the connection, the way the land seemed to pulse with a hidden intent, guiding her toward a predator. The lead pointed to Leonard Merrick, a 72-year-old ex-Bureau of Land Management surveyor, living in a compound near the Aoyo. Vasquez drove out, the desert stretching endless around her, the air dry despite the recent rains. Merrick's home was a fortress of solitude, its walls lined with maps yellowed by time. His hands gnarled from decades of work, shuffled papers as he spoke, his knowledge of the terrain encyclopedic. Yet his eyes flickered with a shadow, a hint of something buried. She remembered a case from her rookie year, a rancher found dead, his survey tools missing, ruled a theft. Could Merrick be tied to that? Feel her suspicion deepen, the silence of the compound amplifying her unease. With evidence mounting, Vasquez secured a warrant. In Merrick's shed, they uncovered thousands of photos, decades of aerial shots tracking the Aoyo's pools, interspersed with images of circles crowned by human heads, captured by a modified drone. Beneath his workshop, a hidden room held the missing hands, preserved in formaldehyde, posed like relics on maps. Confronted, Merrick's mask slipped. Over 14 hours, he confessed, his voice a monotone of madness. You see it, don't you? The Aoyo mirrors the human form from above, its pools like joints in a skeleton. I didn't crate I completed what the land demanded. Hear his delusion, the way it warped the desert into a living altar. Its circles a call for blood. Merrick's tale was a spiral of obsession. For 30 years, he'd mapped the region, his mind fracturing into a belief that the Aoyo's circles spoke, requiring human sacrifice to complete their design. Victims, hikers, prospectors, researchers were chosen for their curiosity, lured with promises of hidden terrain, then executed. He severed their hands, seeing them as tools of measurement stolen by the land. Timing placements so rain briefly framed the skulls in perfect circles. Photographed from above, these moments were his resonance, a harmony between man and earth. Psychiatrists diagnosed severe delusional disorder, but he was convicted on 3 counts of first-degree murder, receiving life without parole. The case left Vasquez scarred. In 2021, a 4th set of bones, from the 1990s, emerged after a rain, confirming Merrick's pattern, though he denied more victims. She now saw the Aoyo differently, its vastness a shroud for darkness. After heavy rains, she drives to its circles, her boots sinking into the mud, checking for more secrets. One night, a stranger approached her at a gas station, voice low. He wasn't alone out there. Before she could question, he vanished into the dusk. Feel her vigilance, the way each puddle reflects her fear, a guardian of a land that hides too much. March 2011, Lakewood County, Oregon, where dreams don't always fade with dawn, they cling, cold and sharp, like frost on a window pane. Sheriff Dwayne Fletcher jolted awake in his darkened bedroom, his heart pounding, sweat beading on his brow. Despite the chill, at 54, with 22 years patrolling the county's forests and lakes, he'd seen enough to harden his nerves, but this dream was different. A man stood by Echo Lake, his face blurred, his voice low and relentless. 40 years buried isn't enough. The words echoed as the man pointed to the water, its surface rippling with shapes that weren't reflections. Fletcher reached out, but the dream dissolved, leaving only the weight of those words. The phone rang, shrill in the pre-dawn silence, pulling him into reality. "Sheriff, we've got a body at Echo Lake," Deputy Sarah Chen said, her voice tight. "Martin Walsh, 38, found in his workshop. Looks like electrocution, but it's not clean." Fletcher dressed quickly, the dream lingering like a shadow. Echo Lake. Why that place? Why now? He'd worked a case there in 1971, a hiker who vanished without a trace, the lake swallowing answers. As he drove through the mist, pines looming. In the gray light, the man's voice from his dream echoed, 40 years buried isn't enough. Walsh's cabin sat on the lake's north shore, its workshop a squat building with dark windows. The air carried the acrid scent of burned metal, mingling with the damp earth. Inside, Walsh lay sprawled beside a radio setup, his skin scorched, his eyes frozen in terror. This wasn't an accident. The medical examiner pointed to bruises on Walsh's wrists. He was held down, she said, and the equipment's been tampered with. Fletcher's gaze fell on a journal, its pages open on the floor, Walsh's handwriting frantic. "Sarah, bag this," he said, his voice steady, despite the unease gnawing at him. Back at the station, Fletcher read the journal under a flickering lamp. Walsh, an engineer from Portland, had been capturing radio waves around Echo Lake, expecting distant broadcasts. Instead, he found a voicemail, elderly, repeating, 40 years buried isn't enough. The entries grew desperate, describing the voice persisting even when the power was off. The final note, dated the night before, read, "It's speaking to me now. I'm trying a new frequency. I have to know what it's saying." 40 years. Fletcher's dream flashed back. The man by the lake. The same words. Was it a coincidence? Or something more? He ordered a canvass of neighbors and a background check on Walsh, his mind turning to 1971. 3 men hikers vanished near Echo Lake that year, their cases unsolved. A USGS radio tower, built on the same site as Walsh's cabin, was abandoned after 3 months, its purpose vague. What connected Walsh's voice to those men? Fletcher visited Helen Maddox, an 82-year-old widow who'd lived by the lake for decades. Her hands shook as she spoke. "Martin asked about the old tower," she said, her eyes avoiding the lake outside. "Said he heard things through his radio, things that scared him. I told him the government men left in 71, didn't take their gear. Folks said that tower caught voices from the water, voices that weren't right." Fletcher pressed her. "What kind of voices?" Maddox's voice dropped to a whisper, like they were trapped under the lake. "Sheriff, like they wanted out." Her words sent a chill through him, mirroring his dream. The lake was speaking, through Walsh, through me. County records confirmed the USGS project, a station to study electromagnetic anomalies, started January 1971, ended April. A classified addendum was locked away. The 1971 disappearances pointed to a drifter, but no suspect emerged. The lead investigator, Deputy Leonard Harris, resigned soon after. Broken. Fletcher tracked down Harris's widow, June, her home cluttered with memories. "Leonard never recovered from those cases," she said, her voice frail. "He'd wake up screaming about voices from the lake, saying they called his name. Before he died, he told me to stay away from Echo Lake, said something lived in the water, using it to speak. Voices from the water." The phrase tied Harris, Walsh, and Fletcher's dream together, a thread spanning decades. Something was reaching out, and Walsh had paid the price. Fletcher listened to Walsh's audio files in his office, the station quiet at midnight. Static filled the air, a low hum that seemed to vibrate in his bones. In the final recordings, a voice emerged, distorted but human. 40 years buried isn't enough. Experts confirmed the audio was untouched, its source unknown. Fletcher's heart pounded. The phrase pointed to 1971, the tower, the missing men. Someone killed Walsh. To silence that voice, a geological survey revealed Echo Lake sat above a cave system, its water-filled chambers amplifying low frequencies. Walsh's cabin, on the tower's site, was a perfect receiver. The lake wasn't just a place, it was a conduit, carrying voices from below. The journal held another clue, faint impressions of an address, enhanced digitally. It pointed to James Carlson, a retired Forest Service worker who demolished the tower in 1982. Fletcher drove to Carlson's home, the lakes image haunting his mirrors. Carlson, 76, lit a cigarette with trembling hands. "We found bodies when we tore down that tower," he confessed. 3 men, buried in the concrete foundation. They were alive when it was poured. "Our boss told us to bury it." Again, said it was national security. Carlson's photos showed skeletons twisted in concrete, fingers clawing, mouths agape. These were the hikers, murdered to hide a secret. Fletcher's investigation turned to Walsh's work. A Portland colleague said Walsh was developing technology to transmit voice through rock, using low frequencies. His prototype, tested at Echo Lake, was missing. Someone feared what it could hear. The trail led to Dr. Stephen Merritt, a geophysicist from the 1971 USGS team. Confronted with Carlson's photos and Walsh's recordings, Merritt broke, his confession spilling out. "The project was Cold War tech," he said, his voice hollow. "We were detecting submarine signals through water. Echo Lake amplified everything, but we heard voices, impossible voices. When 3 locals found our site, we eliminated them, buried them in the tower. When Walsh's experiments hit those frequencies, I had to stop him." Merritt was arrested, charged with 4 murders. The hikers' remains were recovered, identified through DNA, giving families closure. Echo Lake's acoustic properties were confirmed, explaining the voices mostly. Fletcher's report called it a cover-up, but the dream, the man by the lake, lingered in his mind. Locals still hear static near the lake, voices faint in storms. Fletcher, retired, keeps Walsh's journal, its words a reminder of truths that refuse to stay buried. Some nights, he dreams of the lake, the man's voice. Clear, 40 years buried isn't enough. The annual Pinerist Harvest Festival buzzed with laughter until a guttural cry echoed from the forest, silencing the crowd. Sheriff Mason Reed, drawn to that haunting sound, uncovered a grave that would expose a killer lurking within his own town's heart. September 2018 draped northern Idaho's Pinerist in the golden glow of autumn. Its 3,700 residents gathered for the Harvest Festival, a tradition of music and cider under ancient pines. Sheriff Mason Reed, 46, stood as a steady presence, his graying temples and weathered face reflecting 14 years of service. The station, a log cabin nestled among the trees, carried the scent of cedar and aged paper, its walls marked with maps of winding trails. Reed had managed drunks and family feuds, his fairness a cornerstone of trust. But that evening felt different. The festival, alive with children's shouts, halted when a low guttural cry rolled from the forest, a sound that clawed at the spine. He remembered a trapper's tale from a decade ago vanishing near those pines, his camp left intact, a mystery unsolved. Feel the chill, the way that memory resurfaced as he left the crowd, radio in hand, following the worker who'd heard it 6 miles out. The worker, a gaunt man named Paul, led Reed to a clearing, the air thick with pine sap and the musk of damp earth. A shallow grave lay exposed, its edges softened by recent rains, revealing a woman's skeleton. Reed crouched, his knees sinking into the soil, his fingers tracing the crossed hands over her chest. A small carved wooden pine figure nestled between her ribs, its surface smooth, almost alive. In 14 years, he'd never encountered such a deliberate marker, part offering, part omen. See the stillness? The way the figure seemed to pulse with a hidden intent, a shrine to something dark. Forensics identified her as Jessica Landon, 23, missing from Clearwater County since July 2016, last seen at a Pinerist gas station after her car failed. Her hands, like the figure, hinted at a ritual beyond comprehension. Reed escalated the search, enlisting state police cadaver dogs. The animals traced a semicircle around an ancient pine, unearthing for more graves, each with remains similarly posed, hands crossed, pine figures placed. Pinerists' quiet streets turned tense. its residents whispering of ghosts. Drawing federal agents whose lights pierced the dusk, Vasquez pored over records, noting the victims' young women, travelers, no local connections. Feel the burden. The weight of a town's trust, fraying as he studied the grave's alignment. A profiler suggested a killer versed in the forest, socially skilled, tied to Pinerists' past. The pine figures pointed to a ritual, perhaps a warped tradition buried in time. 3 weeks later, a local historian, Clara Abon, approached Reed after a town meeting, her voice low. That cry at the festival, it reminded me of 1987. The Woodsman's Festival stopped after a girl vanished. They called it a prank, but some knew more. Her words struck deep. Reed questioned elders, their faces hardening. Eleanor Palmer, 83, former librarian, confessed over tea, her hands shaking. Marianne Schaefer, passing through, had car trouble. They picked her as the forest bride, a jest, until drunk men took it too far. They returned alone. The sheriff then covered it, canceled the festival. Sense the complicity, the decades of silence carved into her wrinkles. She named Thomas Garrett, 13 then, who'd witnessed it. Garrett, now 50, owned the lumber empire. A respected figure, generous with aid. Reed dug quietly, finding Garrett's home near the graves, his search and rescue role granting forest mastery. Surveillance began, and on night 4, officers watched him load a shovel, driving to a logging road. In a clearing, a grave waited. Amber Reynolds, 21, unconscious beside it, reported missing that day. See the dread. The moment Red signaled the arrest. Garrett's calm, shattering. At his property, a hidden room under the workshop held evidence. Victims' items, journals of kills, pine figures in various stages. The journals unveiled a dark evolution. Scarred by Marianne's 1987 death, Garrett was captivated by the cover-up, learning silence's power. As an adult, he revived the ritual, casting himself as the forest's guardian, targeting strangers as brides, clues as aid to stranded women. Interest in missing cases had been overlooked. Interrogated, Garrett spoke evenly, shocked at capture, believing townsfolk suspected but stayed mute. A probe into 1987 implicated elders in obstruction, forcing Pinerists to face its shame. Feel the betrayal, the way Reed's faith in his mentor, the past sheriff. Dissolved. Garrett was convicted on 5 murders and 1 attempted receiving life, without parole. Amber survived, but her trauma lingered. Reed faced resignation calls, yet stayed, reforming the department with cold case protocols and audits. This wasn't just one man, he declared. It was silence valuing comfort over truth. That changes now. Pinerist mended slowly, tourism fading, some leaving. Hikers found pine figures on trails, tributes Reed collected quietly. One, dusk, a recluse muttered. The forest remembers. Feel his watchfulness, the way he scans the pines, sensing secrets still buried. November 17, 2007, Crawford County, Kentucky, where the ground whispers truths no one dares to hear. Sheriff Ethan Blackwood knelt on Martha Jennings' frost-covered lawn, his flashlight beam tracing a pattern that defied reason. At 50, with 18 years guarding the county's rolling hills and shadowed forests, he'd seen the strange vandalized graves, ritual markings by lost teens, but this was different. A perfect circle, 3 feet wide, bare soil gleaming as if swept clean, surrounded by untouched grass and fallen leaves. Martha, a widow of 82, had called an hour ago, her voice trembling, reporting a tall figure at her tree line, watching her home through the dusk. Blackwood expected a hunter or a prankster, but the circle, pristine in the cold night, gripped his chest with an unspoken warning. This wasn't human work. This was something else. Sheriff, it's out there, Deputy Lisa Harmon said, her breath visible in the chill, pointing to the forest edge 200 yards beyond the house. Blackwood aimed his spotlight, and his heart stuttered. A silhouette towered, at least 6.5 feet, its arms unnaturally long, torso impossibly thin, face a blank void in the harsh light. It stood rigid, untouched by the wind that clawed at Blackwood's coat, its presence heavy, like a weight on the air itself. "Crawford County Sheriff's Department," he called, his hand steady on his gun despite the dread curling in his gut. "Identify yourself." The figure remained still, absorbing the light, its silence louder than the night. Harmon's voice dropped. "I shouted earlier. No answer. I got to 50 yards. Then, something stopped me." Blackwood's pulse thundered as he stepped toward the tree line, the circle's image seared into his mind. Who or what leaves a mark like that? At 100 yards, the figure tilted forward, defying gravity, as if leaning to study them. "It's watching us." In an instant, it was gone, its movement a blur too fast for eyes to track, swallowed by the dense Shawnee National Forest. Blackwood and Harmon scoured the area, their boots sinking into damp earth, finding another circle identical to the first, bare soil glistening under their beams. No footprints, no trace, just this mark, like a scar on the land. Blackwood radioed for backup, his voice calm but strained. "Suspicious activity at Jennings' property. Secure the perimeter." Dawn brought no answers, only whispers. Neighbors reported circles near their homes, paired with sightings of a tall, faceless figure standing at fences, fields, even backyards. By noon, the county was alive with fear. The figure named Crawford Watchman, by a local news anchor spreading through hushed conversations. Blackwood logged 11 reports in 2 weeks, each eerily consistent, a silhouette, unmoving for hours, vanishing when approached, always leaving a circle. It's moving clockwise, circling the county like a noose tightening. He stood in his office, maps pinned to the wall, red lines tracing the pattern, his fingers tracing the spiral. This isn't random. It's hunting. Social media fueled the panic. Posts flooding with grainy photos too blurry to prove anything, and theories ranging from government experiments to vengeful spirits. At town meetings, Blackwood faced crowds of frightened residents, their voices overlapping. "It's at my farm every night," a rancher said, his hands shaking. "It just watches." A mother clutched her child, whispering, "My kids saw it weeks ago, but I didn't believe them." Blackwood urged calm, his badge a shield against his own doubts. But the circle's perfect, deliberate nod at his resolve. "What's out there, and why now?" 3 nights after Jennings' call, deputies found her dead in her bedroom. Her heart stopped. The medical examiner cited natural causes, but Blackwood's blood ran cold at the scene. Every window was bolted, blinds drawn, so tight no light could seep through. On her nightstand, a circle of small objects, buttons, coins, pebbles mirrored the lawn's mark, arranged with a precision that felt ritualistic. Martha didn't do this. She was too scared. Blackwood stood in the dim room, the air thick with dust and fear, his flashlight trembling. Something entered here, something that didn't need doors. Over the next month, 3 more elderly residents who'd reported the watchman died 2 heart attacks, 1 stroke. Each home was sealed. Each bedside held a circle of trinkets, as if the figure left its signature. It's targeting them, the vulnerable, the watchers. Blackwood's nights grew sleepless, his mind replaying the tree-line silhouette, its faceless gaze. He requested state police support, bringing Dr. Catherine Chen, a criminal psychologist specializing in collective panic. Chen sat across from him, her notebook open, her voice measured. "This is mass psychogenic illness," she said. "A real trespasser might have started it, but fear is killing these people, amplifying stress into fatal episodes." Blackwood leaned forward, his jaw tight. "That explains the deaths, but not the circles, not the objects. They're too precise, too consistent." Chen's eyes softened. "People under stress can create patterns, Ethan. They see what they fear." "She's wrong. It's not in our heads." Blackwood mapped the sightings again, the spiral now pointing to Millfield, the county seat, his home. It's coming for me. He drove through Millfield's quiet streets, past families' boarding windows, children clutching parents, the air heavy with dread. The county's falling apart, and I can't stop it. One night, Blackwood woke at 3:17 a.m., a cold certainty gripping him. He moved to his bedroom window, and there it was. The watchman stood at his property's edge, its silhouette stark against the moon, its gaze locked on him. Unlike other reports, it shifted as he moved, following him from room to room, its presence a pressure on his mind. It knows I'm here. Blackwood grabbed his gun and radio, calling backup, then slipped outside, his boots silent on the grass. He circled wide, approaching from behind, his flashlight steady despite his racing heart. At 15 yards, the beam caught it, and his breath stopped. Its form was almost human, but wrong limbs too long. Movements like a shadow unfolding, covering ground with impossible speed. Deputies found Blackwood standing in a circular clearing, his face ashen. A fine powder human ash mixed with local clay coated the soil, a substance foreign to his yard. This isn't a prank, it's real. Blackwood threw himself into research, poring over county archives, meeting historians and archaeologists from Louisville. He uncovered Shawnee burial records, describing ceremonial clearings like the circles, tied to sentinels guarding sacred land. Developments, highways, subdivisions had disturbed unmarked graves over decades, stirring something ancient. Is it their vengeance, or our guilt given form? Blackwood's theory grew darker. The watchman was a Shawnee entity, feeding on the fear of the elderly, their life force sustaining its vigil. He shared it at a tense meeting with Chen and his deputies, his voice urgent. "These circles aren't random," he said, pointing to a map scarred with red lines. "They're ceremonial, tied to land we've violated." Chen's face hardened. "Ethan, you're exhausted. This is paranoia." She recommended medical leave, and Blackwood agreed, his mind too clouded to argue. But 2 weeks later, he was gone. Deputies found his home empty, his badge and gun on the table, walls covered with maps, Shawnee texts, and threads linking the watchman to ancient rites. A search team scoured Shawnee Forest, finding a clearing, 30 feet wide, unlike any before. At its center, Blackwood's flashlight glowed, illuminating a circle of river stones, each etched with faint symbols no one could read. He was taken, like the land claimed him. The watchman's sightings were ruled hysteria, the deaths natural. Evidence sash samples, Blackwood's notes vanished in mishaps. Burned in a fire, blamed on faulty wiring. Deputy Lisa Harmon, now interim sheriff, keeps Blackwood's files locked away, her face unreadable when asked about them. She issued a new rule. Every clearing in the woods, no matter how small, must be documented. Locals still see the watchman, a shadow at the edge of fields, its gaze heavy with a hunger older than the county. On moonless nights, they avoid the forest, whispering of circles that appear without warning, as if the earth itself watches, waiting for the next to fall. The Quarry Fest of Sparrow County once rang with the clang of hammers, but its abrupt end in 1998 left a silence heavier than stone. When Sheriff Drew Callahan probed a surveyor's grim discovery, he unearthed a killer's reign preserved in concrete, a secret the past refused to yield. March 2019 softened Sparrow County, Ohio, with the gentle greens of early spring. Its 720 square miles of farmland and quiet hamlets wrapped in a deceptive calm. Sheriff Drew Callahan, 47, was a beacon of order, his 11 years of service etched into the lines of his weathered face, his office a haven of maps and files amid Hollowbrook's 8,200 residents. The station carried the scent of polished oak and the musty tang of old ledgers, its walls tracing the county's quarries and fields. Callahan had managed petty thefts and family squabbles, but that morning, A faded memory surfaced, an old quarry worker's tale of the Quarry Fest, a vibrant celebration of stonework that drew crowds until its sudden cancellation in 1998. The festival, once alive with music and the thud of mallets, ended after a night of chaos. Workers fleeing, leaving tools scattered. Elders whispered of a curse, a shadow over the limestone quarry that silenced the town. Feel the enigma, the way that mystery pulsed as his phone rang at 2 p.m. A surveyor's voice quivering, reporting bones trapped in concrete. The quarry emerged from the mist, its jagged cliffs softened by moss, the air thick with the earthy scent of damp stone and rusted machinery. Callahan stepped forward, his boots crunching on loose gravel, the surveyor's pale hand guiding him to a fractured slab. Beneath, 3 skeletons lay exposed, their bones fused into the concrete, air pockets marking a desperate struggle against a suffocating end. In 11 years, he'd never seen such a calculated tomb, cold, unyielding, a prison of intent. See the captivity, the way the gray mass gripped the remains, preserving their final terror. Forensics dated them 10 to 15 years old, bound and bludgeoned. Before being poured alive, their identities lost to national databases, transients erased from a careless world. Callahan's mind drifted to a laborer's disappearance in 1997. His body never found, his family's pleas dismissed as hysteria. Was this the quarry's dark secret? Days later, a retired quarryman, Thomas Grady, shuffled into the station, his hands gnarled from decades of toil. That festival hid something, he rasped, sliding a yellowed photograph across the desk. It captured the Quarry Fest in 1997. A crowd gathered, with Robert Egan, a concrete contractor, standing apart, his gaze piercing. He bought the land after it stopped, Grady said. People started vanishing. Callahan's team delved into Egan's past, uncovering gaps, years unaccounted, properties unmarked. A map, sketched on the photo's reverse, marked 7 sites, its lines trembling with urgency. Feel the foreboding, the weight of a buried truth as he organized excavations, beginning at an overgrown lot near the water tower. 2 days of grueling work revealed 2 more bodies in concrete, aged 15 to 18 years, their bones fragile with time's neglect. Over the following weeks, digs at the map's locations uncovered 16 additional victims, 9 men, 7 women, all encased, tortured, spanning 1998 to 2005. Sparrow County staggered, state and federal agents flooding its tranquil lanes. DNA identified 11 as drifters, petty offenders, or estranged souls, their disappearances overlooked by a society that turned its back. Since the vastness, the sheer scope of a killer's domain hidden beneath the county's earth, Callahan recalled a truck driver's vanishing in 2001, his rig found empty near the quarry, his fate chalked up to desertion, another threat ignored. The magnitude pressed on him, the quarry's silence now a hollow roar of the past. A local historian, Margaret Holt, arrived with a tattered journal from the quarry's last foreman, her voice a whisper. Egan worked that final night. He had a woman with him, Elaine, who lingered after. The clue led Callahan to Campbell's abandoned farm at dusk, the air heavy with the decay of rotting wood and tangled vines. Elaine Morgan emerged, her frame frail, her eyes shadowed with decades of guilt. I helped him bury them, she confessed, her voice fracturing. I never killed, but I knew. I was 17 when it began. He was 36. See her despair, the years of silence etched into her hollowed face. Egan, her neighbor, abducted undesirables, drifters, petty thieves, labeling it cleansing. He held them in a storm cellar, subjecting them to days of torment before encasing them in concrete forms, his hands steady as a craftsman of death. Elaine's story deepened. Egan died of a heart attack in 2005, halting the spree. Diagnosed with terminal cancer months ago, she sought redemption. Fear kept me mute, but I can't die with this burden. Callahan arrested her, her words guiding him to the cellar, a preserved torture chamber, its walls stained with the residue of suffering. Egan's journal, discovered among his effects, catalogued all 19 kills, aligning with unreleased evidence in chilling precision. Elaine pleaded guilty to accessory charges, receiving 20 years with parole after 7, succumbing to her illness. 14 months later, her final breath, a sigh of release too late. Feel her absolution, the weight lifted as she slipped away. Callahan revamped missing persons protocols. The quarry transformed into a preserve with a memorial stone. The case left him scarred, each concrete slab a mirror to overlooked lives. One evening, a farmer confided Egan had a shadow. A figure melted into the dusk before Callahan could react. Feel his disquiet, the way he pauses at construction sites, sensing the silenced cries beneath fresh foundations, a legacy that clings to his every step. Darkness has a way of hiding truths you're not ready to face. At 19, I thought I knew fierce sleepless nights, tight deadlines, the weight of growing up, but nothing prepared me for what I found in the basement of my father's house, a place I called home, but never truly understood. It wasn't just a room, it was a boundary, a thin veil between my world and something else, something that stirred beneath my bed, clawing at the edges of my sanity. That night in 2013 changed me, and even now, I can't escape its shadow. I was living with my dad in a house older than both of us combined, a rambling structure on the outskirts of town, its walls steeped in decades of forgotten stories. My room was in the basement, a choice born of necessity more than desire. I wanted space, a corner of the world to call my own, away from the creaking floors and family noise upstairs. The basement wasn't inviting, cold concrete walls, a single, high window letting in faint slivers of light, and a lingering dampness that clung to everything. But I made it work. A bed with a sagging mattress, a desk cluttered with books and empty coffee mugs, a rug to soften the chill of the floor, it was enough. Or so I thought. Insomnia had been my companion for years, a restless beast that kept me awake when the world slept. That night was no exception. It was late, past midnight, the clock's red glow casting an eerie hue across the room. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind a tangle of half-formed thoughts. The house was quiet, save for the occasional groan of settling wood, a sound I'd learned to ignore. I was drifting, caught in that hazy space between wakefulness and dreams, when something snapped me back, a faint, irregular sound, sharp and out of place. Rising from beneath my bed, my eyes flew open, my heart lurching in my chest. The room was swallowed in darkness, the window's light too weak to reach the corners. I held my breath, straining to hear, praying it was nothing, a loose pipe, a mouse, anything I could explain. But then it came again, a rasping drag, like fingernails scraping against rough wood. It was soft, tentative, but unmistakable. My body went rigid, every muscle locked in a vice of fear. I told myself to move, to reach for the lamp on my nightstand, but I couldn't. It was as if the air itself had turned solid, pinning me to the mattress. The sound didn't stop. It grew faster, more insistent, like something was testing the surface, searching for a way out. It wasn't just scraping now, there was a heavy rhythmic force, a dull impact that vibrated through the bed frame. I felt it, not just heard it. A tremor that ran through my spine, like something was pushing up from below. My mind raced, conjuring horrors I couldn't name, trapped animals, crawling hands, a figure twisted and wrong. I thought of the cats, but they were upstairs. Their scratching, nothing like this. This was deliberate, alive, and it knew I was there. I lay frozen, my pulse a deafening roar in my ears. The sounds intensified, a relentless cycle of dragging and striking, each one louder, closer. I could almost see it, a shape in the dark, clawing at the wood, inches from my back, its intent seeping through the mattress. My breath came in shallow, ragged gasps. my chest so tight I thought I'd suffocate. I wanted to scream, to bolt for the door, but my body refused, trapped in a prison of terror. I kept thinking, if I stay still, it won't know I'm awake. But I knew it did. It felt me, just as I felt it. Minutes stretched into hours, or so it seemed, the sounds growing wilder, more desperate. The mattress shifted, just slightly, like something was pressing up, testing the barrier between us. My fear was a living thing now, clawing at my insides, but beneath it, something else stirred on jaw. I was tired of being helpless, tired of lying there like prey. The rage surged, hot and sudden, and I snapped. I threw off the blankets, my legs trembling, and stumbled across the room, my bare feet slapping the cold floor. My hand found the light switch, and I slammed it on, the bulb flooding the room with stark, unforgiving light. I spun to face the bed, my breath ragged, my fists clenched. The sounds had stopped, the silence so abrupt it was like a physical blow. My eyes locked on the bed, its rumpled sheets casting jagged shadows. I dropped to my knees, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst, and yanked up the bed skirt. Nothing, just dust and empty space, the concrete floor, bare and cold. I stared, my mind reeling. I'd heard it, felt it, but there was no trace, no marks, no scratches, no sign of anything. The room was still, but it wasn't empty. I could feel it, a presence lingering, watching. I stood, my legs unsteady, and shouted into the silence, "What do you want from me?" My voice cracked, echoing off the walls, unanswered. I don't know how I slept at night, but I did, curled on the couch upstairs, every light in the house blazing. The basement felt different after that, heavier, like it was holding a secret it wanted me to share. I avoided my room, sleeping on the couch or staying out late, anything to keep from facing that bed. I told myself it was a nightmare, a trick of my exhausted mind, but the memory of those sounds wouldn't fade. Life moved on, as it always does. I went to school, worked my part-time job, buried the fear under routine, but the house never felt the same. Every creak, every shadow made me jump, my eyes darting to corners, expecting something to emerge. I didn't tell anyone, not my dad, not my friends. Who would believe me? A 19-year-old scared of his own bedroom. I pushed it down, locked it away, but it was always there, a splinter in my mind. Months later, everything changed. A friend from school, Sarah, needed a place to stay, and my dad offered her the spare room on the top floor. She was practical, grounded, the kind of person who laughed at ghost stories. On her third night, she found me in the kitchen, her face drained of color, her eyes wide with something I recognized. Fear. "You're not going to believe this," she said, her voice barely steady. My stomach twisted, a cold dread settling. And she told me about her night lying awake, the house too quiet. When she heard it, a scraping sound, then a heavy, rhythmic striking, coming from under her bed. She'd felt the mattress shake, like something was trying to break through. She'd flipped on the light, checked under the bed, and found nothing, just like me. I hadn't told her about my night. I hadn't told a soul. There was no way she could have known. We sat there, the kitchen clock ticking in the silence, our eyes locked in shared terror. Whatever it wasn't confined to the basement. It was in the house, moving, claiming every corner as its own. Sarah didn't stay long after that. She found a new place within weeks, her laughter quieter, her eyes haunted. I couldn't blame her. I stayed, but I never slept in that basement room again. I moved my bed upstairs, checked under it every night, a ritual I couldn't shake. Years have passed, but that night still lives in me. I can't sleep in complete darkness anymore. I can't walk into a basement without my heart racing, without listening for that sound, that rhythm of something trapped, something hungry. I don't know what was under my bed, what followed Sarah to her room. A ghost, a memory the house refused to release. All I know is it was real. and it wanted us to feel it. Some fears you outgrow, others carve themselves into you, and no amount of light can chase them away. It was supposed to be just another night of music and drinks, a fleeting escape into the pulse of Snohomosh's Oxford bar, where the air hums with life and the shadows whisper of death. My father, a man of steady hands and skeptical eyes, stepped into that place, expecting nothing more than a good band and a glass of red wine. But what he found in the basement bar was something else, something that clawed at the edges of reality, leaving him clutching a truth he couldn't explain. This is his story, one that lingers in my bones like a cold fog, one that makes me question what it means to stand in a place where the past refuses to rest. The Oxford sits in Snohomish like a relic, its weathered brick facade hiding stories that locals murmur over late-night beers. It's a bar etched with violence too, maybe 3 deaths, some whispered to be murders, staining its history. My parents were drawn to it, not for the rumors, but for the live bands that filled the air with electric chords and the crowd's infectious energy. Yet, every visit brought tales from staff and regulars, stories that clung to the mind like damp rot. Women found themselves trapped in the bathroom, doors sealed shut until someone forced them open from outside. Plates would fall in the kitchen, untouched, their fragments scattered across empty floors. Patrons spoke of unseen figures brushing past, leaving a chill that sank deeper than winter's bite. These weren't just stories, they were warnings, and my father was about to walk into their heart. He told me about that night over dinner, years later, his voice low, as if speaking too loudly might summon it back. It was a Friday, the kind of evening where the world feels alive, buzzing with possibility. The Oxford was packed, laughter and music spilling from the main floor. My father, tired from a long week, craved something simple, a glass of red wine to sip while the band played. He ordered at the upstairs bar, the bartender's hands moving with practiced ease, and then he descended to the basement. The moment his foot touched the first step, the air changed, growing heavy, stale, like breathing through a veil. The basement bar was a different beast from the vibrant chaos above. Dimly lit, its walls lined with scuffed pool tables and stools that had seen decades of spilled drinks and brawls. It felt like a place forgotten by time. He settled at the counter, the wine glass cool in his hand, its deep crimson catching the faint glow of a flickering bulb overhead. The room was quiet, save for the muffled thump of music from upstairs and the occasional clink of bottles behind the bar. He took a sip, letting the warmth of the wine ground him, but something felt off. The air pressed against his skin, not cold, but thick, like standing in a room where someone had just left or was still there, watching. He glanced around, seeing only a few patrons hunched over their drinks, their faces shadowed. The bartender, a woman with sharp eyes and a tired smile, polished glasses with mechanical rhythm. Nothing seemed out of place, yet his pulse quickened, an instinct he couldn't name. Then it happened, a moment that split reality in two. He was raising the glass to his lips when a force, sudden and invisible, tore through it. The bowl of the glass disintegrated, collapsing inward as if crushed by an unseen hand. He froze, his fingers still curled around the slender stem, now attached to nothing. No shards fell, no wine splashed. The floor beneath him was clean, untouched, as if the glass and its contents had been erased from existence. His breath caught, his mind racing to make sense of it. He looked at his hand, expecting cuts, blood, something, but there was nothing. Just the stem, smooth and cold, mocking him with its emptiness. What do you do when the world breaks its own rules? My father stood there, heart pounding, the stem trembling in his grip. The basement seemed to close in, the shadows in the corners stretching longer, thicker. He felt eyes on him, not from the other patrons, but from somewhere deeper, somewhere he couldn't see. The bartender's voice cut through the haze. "You okay?" she asked, her tone flat, as if she'd seen this before. He stumbled toward her, holding out the stem like evidence of a crime. My glass it's gone, he managed, his voice sounding foreign to his own ears. She took the stem, her eyes flicking over it with no surprise, and shrugged. Happens sometimes, she said, sliding a fresh glass across the counter. On the house. Her calmness was a blade, slicing through his disbelief. Telling him this wasn't an accident, it was the Oxford dot. He didn't drink the new wine. He couldn't. The weight of that moment clung to him, heavy as the air in that basement. He climbed the stairs, each step a fight against the urge to look back, to see if something followed. Upstairs, the music was louder, the crowd oblivious, but he felt marked, like he'd crossed a line he didn't know existed. The Oxford didn't just let you leave. It left something in you, a question that gnawed at your sanity. He drove home. That night, the stem still in his pocket, a talisman of the impossible. He kept it for years, pulling it out sometimes to stare at it, to wonder if he'd imagined it all. But the memory was too sharp, too real, the way the glass vanished, the way the bartender's eyes held no fear, only acceptance. I remember the first time he told me, sitting at our kitchen table, the stem between us like a relic. His hands, usually so steady, shook as he spoke. He said, the worst part wasn't the glass breaking, it was the absence of evidence. The way reality rewrote itself in that moment. What else could vanish? What else was watching? He'd always been the practical one, the man who fixed things, who didn't believe in ghosts or gods. But that night changed him. He never went back to the Oxford, though my mother did, chasing the music, the atmosphere. She'd laugh off the stories, but I saw the way her eyes darted to the basement door when she spoke of it, like she knew something waited there. The Oxford is still open, still pulling in crowds with its bands and its history. Locals still talk, their voices low, about the bathroom doors that lock on their own, the plates that fall, the figures that move unseen. But I think about my father, standing in that basement, holding a stem that shouldn't exist, and I wonder what else the Oxford hides. Is it the dead, tethered to the violence that stained those walls? Or is it something older, something that thrives on the fear it sows? I don't know. I only know that my father's story isn't just a story, it's a warning. Step into the Oxford, and you might not come out the same. Years later, I met a man who'd worked there, a former bouncer with scars on his knuckles, and a voice rough as gravel. He told me about a night when the power flickered, and the basement bar went dark for a full minute. When the lights returned, every glass on the counter was empty, their contents gone, no spills, no stains. He quit the next day. His story felt like an echo, a thread tying back to my father's. Proof that the Oxford doesn't just haunt one man, it haunts anyone who lingers too long. I keep that stem now, locked in a drawer, but sometimes, in the quiet of the night, I feel it calling, urging me to go to Snohomish, to see for myself. And that's the worst part, the pull, the need to know, even when every instinct screams to stay away. 5 years ago, I stood on the edge of a darkness that wasn't just shadows, it was alive, waiting, and it knew my name. At 22, I thought I understood fear. I'd faced down drunks in bar fights, stared into the eyes of men twice my size, and walked away with my head high. But that night, in a rotting house on the outskirts of town, something waited for me in the basement, something that didn't care about my height, my strength, or my faith. It wanted me to break, and I almost did. I'm a Christian, always have been. I grew up hearing stories of demons and restless spirits, but they were just tales to me, like campfire ghost stories that fade with the morning light. I never felt anything beyond the ordinary until that autumn evening when my friends called. Their voices buzzed with excitement, words tumbling over each other as they told me about a ghost hunter they'd met, a guy who claimed he could talk to the dead. He'd heard about a house in our town, a place locals avoided, its windows dark, and its yard choked with weeds. They wanted to investigate, and they wanted me along not for my faith, but for my size. At 6'3", and built like a linebacker, I was the muscle, the guy who'd step in if things got weird. I laughed it off, figuring it'd be a fun night, maybe a few creepy noises to spice up the boredom. I didn't know I was walking into a nightmare. The house loomed at the end of a dirt road, its silhouette jagged against the twilight sky. The air felt wrong before we even parked, heavy, like a storm was brewing inside my chest. My friends piled out of the car, joking to mask their nerves. But I felt it a prickle on my skin, a whisper in my mind urging me to turn back. You don't belong here. I ignored it, chalking it up to the house's reputation. Everyone in town had a story about this place. Footsteps in empty rooms, shadows that moved against the light. I told myself it was just rumors, but then I saw him, the ghost hunter. He stumbled out the front door, his face pale as bone, and vomited into the overgrown grass. He'd been inside alone for an hour, setting up his equipment. When he looked up, his eyes were wide, haunted. "It's bad in there," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. My stomach twisted, but I followed him inside, my boots heavy on the creaking porch. The interior was a tomb of dust and decay. The wallpaper peeled in strips, revealing mold-blackened wood beneath. The air smelled of damp earth and something sharper, like rusted metal or old blood. We set up the ghost hunter's gear, an ovilus, to catch spirit voices, a spirit box that scanned radio frequencies for words from the beyond, and an SLS camera that mapped human shapes in the dark. My friends fumbled with the equipment, their laughter forced, while I scanned the shadows, my heart thudding against my ribs. The ghost hunter, still shaken, explained how each device worked, but his hands trembled, and he kept glancing toward the basement door, a slab of warped wood at the far end of the hall. Something's down there, I thought, then pushed it away. I wasn't here to get spooked. I was here to keep things under control. For the first hour, nothing happened. The house was silent, save for the occasional groan of settling beams. One of my friends swore he heard a faint tap, but we brushed it off as the wind. The ovilus sat mute, its screen dark. I started to relax, leaning against a wall, my arms crossed. Maybe this was all hype, a big show for nothing. Then, at exactly 11:45 p.m., the air changed. It was like a switch flipped, the room growing colder, the shadows deeper. My breath caught in my throat, and I saw my friends freeze, their eyes darting to the corners. The ovilus lit up, spitting out a single word in a mechanical voice. "Ego, Latin," the ghost hunter whispered, his face drained of color. "It means I am." Before I could process it, the spirit box hissed to life, a torrent of static laced, with syllables guttural, ancient, forming phrases I couldn't understand, but felt in my bones. The SLS camera beeped, its screen showing stick figures moving where no one stood, some upright, others crawling low to the ground, their limbs bent at wrong angles. The house was awake now, and it wasn't just watching, it was playing with us. Doors in the upstairs hall swung open, their hinges silent but deliberate. Curtains swayed in rooms with no windows, the fabric rippling as if brushed by unseen hands. My friends huddled closer, their bravado gone, while the ghost hunter muttered prayers under his breath. I wanted to run, to drag everyone out, and never look back, but my legs felt rooted, my body betraying me. "You're the muscle," I told myself. "Stay strong." But the air grew heavier, pressing against my chest, and I knew we weren't alone. Something was here, something old, something that hated us for stepping into its domain. After an hour of chaos, the activity stopped as suddenly as it began. The ovilus went dark, the spirit box fell silent, and the SLS camera showed nothing but empty space. We stood there, panting, our eyes locked on each other, waiting for the next move. The ghost hunter broke the silence, his voice steady but strained. "Hey, big guy," he said, looking at me. Down there, he pointed to the basement door, its surface scarred and blackened, as if it had been clawed at for years. My heart sank. I wanted to say no, to tell him to go himself, but my friend's eyes were on me, pleading, and I couldn't back down. You're not a coward, I thought, but the lie tasted bitter. The ghost hunter handed me the spirit box and a cheap flashlight, its beam flickering like it was already half dead. Just listen, he said, showing me how to tune the spirit box. If it speaks, you'll know. I nodded, my throat dry, and stepped toward the door. The basement stairs descended into a void, each step groaning under my weight. The air grew colder with every foot, a damp chill that seeped into my bones. The flashlight's beam barely cut through the darkness, illuminating patches of cracked concrete and cobwebs that swayed as if breathing. At the bottom, I stood alone, the spirit box heavy in my hand, its static, a low hum that seemed to pulse with my heartbeat. The basement was vast, its corners swallowed by shadow, and I felt eyes on me, hundreds of them, watching from places I couldn't see. I wanted to call out, to prove I wasn't afraid, but my voice caught, trapped behind the fear clawing at my chest. Just do it, I told myself. Get it over with. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. Time felt wrong down there, stretched and distorted. The spirit box droned on, its static unbroken, and I started to think nothing would happen. Then, without warning, the air shifted, a sudden weight pressing against me, like the room itself was closing in. Something's here. My pulse roared in my ears, and I gripped the flashlight tighter, its beam trembling in my hand. Before I could move, a chair in the corner, heavy wooden thing bolted to the floor, tore free with a sickening snap. It rose, impossibly, hovering above my head, its legs pointed downward like spears. I stared, frozen, my mind screaming that this couldn't be real. But then it slammed into the ceiling, splintering into fragments that rained down around me. The spirit box erupted, a single word cutting through the static. Burn. The voice was deep, guttural, not human, and it echoed inside my skull, promising destruction. The flashlight died, plunging me into darkness. No, no, no. I smacked it against my palm, my hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped it. The beam flickered back on, weak and stuttering, and that's when I saw it. Right in front of me, taller than I am, broader than any man I've ever fought, stood a figure. Its edges were blurred, like smoke given form, but its presence was solid, crushing, a weight that made my knees buckle. Its eyes, if it had eyes, burned into me, not with light, but with hunger, a need to consume everything I was. I've faced danger before, stared down knives and fists, but this was different. This thing could kill me, and it wanted to. My body betrayed me, warmth spreading down my leg as I stood paralyzed, my pride meaningless against the terror. Run! The command broke through, a spark of instinct in the fog of fear. I turned, my boots slipping on the damp floor, and sprinted for the stairs. The thing was behind me. I felt it, a cold pressure at my back, its presence chasing me like a predator. The basement door was closed, a barrier between me and safety, and I didn't hesitate. I threw my full weight against it, 230 pounds of desperation, and the wood splintered, the hinges tearing free. I stumbled into the hallway, my friends' shouts distant as I ran for the front door, out into the night, and straight to my truck. I locked myself inside, my hands shaking so badly I couldn't hold the keys, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The others came running out minutes later, their faces pale, but I didn't care. I was alive, and that was enough. Later, a priest came to bless the house, walking its halls with a cross and holy water, his prayers a shield against whatever we'd unleashed. My friends said the activity stopped, that the house felt lighter, but I never went back to find out. That night changed me. I still feel it sometimes, in the quiet moments before dawn, that weight, that gaze, watching from the shadows. I'm not the same man I was, not as fearless, not as certain. Whatever was in that basement wasn't just a ghost. It was something older, something that knew me, and it wanted me to know it too. Safety is an illusion, a fragile thing you don't notice until it's gone. I learned this in a house I thought was mine, a quiet rental where I built a life, unaware that someone else was building one too beneath me, in the dark. It started with small things, a light left on, a sound in the night. But it ended with a face I'll never forget, a stranger who knew me better than I knew myself. This is the story of the man who lived under my floor, and the fear he left behind. I'd always been a creature of habit, craving routine in a world that felt too chaotic. When I moved into the little house on the edge of town, it seemed perfect, affordable, cozy, with a charm that spoke of simpler times. The wooden floors gleamed under sunlight. The kitchen smelled faintly of herbs, and the backyard was a tangle of wildflowers. I was 22, working long hours at a local diner, and all I wanted was a place to call my own. The house gave me that, or so I thought. The layout was simple: a living room, a bedroom, a small kitchen, and a laundry room tucked in the back. The laundry room held a washer, a dryer, and something I barely noticed at first: a square wooden hatch in the floor, flush with the tiles, leading to a crawl space below. It was locked from the outside, a rusty padlock securing it, and I had no reason to open it. Crawl spaces were for pipes and cobwebs, not for people. I'd glance at it sometimes, but it was just part of the house, unremarkable, forgettable. That changed one evening, a few weeks after I'd settled in. I'd had a brutal shift, spilled coffee, rude customers, the usual grind, and all I wanted was a hot shower and my bed. I walked through the house, dropping my bag on the couch, and headed to the laundry room to toss in a load. The light was on. I stopped, my hand on the doorframe, a prickle of unease running down my spine. I was sure I'd turned it off that morning, rushing out the door with my keys in one hand and a granola bar in the other. I shook it off, blaming exhaustion, and flicked the switch, plunging the room into darkness before heading to the shower. Sleep didn't come easily that night. I tossed and turned, the day's stress lingering like a bad taste. Around 2 a.m., I woke, my eyes snapping open in the dark. The house was silent, but something felt wrong, like the air had shifted, grown heavier. Then I heard it, a faint, rhythmic sound from the laundry room, like something tapping against wood. My heart skipped, and I lay still, straining to listen. It was soft, almost imperceptible, but steady, like a heartbeat under the floor. I told myself it was the house settling, or maybe a pipe, but my body tensed, every nerve alert. I debated checking it out, my phone's flashlight a tempting lifeline on the nightstand, but the thought of walking through the dark house, alone, stopped me. I pulled the blanket tighter, willing the sound to stop, and eventually, it did. Sleep came in fits and starts, and by morning, I'd convinced myself it was nothing. I checked the laundry room, the hatch still locked, the light off. I laughed at my paranoia, but the unease lingered, a shadow I couldn't shake. The next day, I called the landlord, a gruff man who sounded more annoyed than concerned. Any pest issues I should know about? I asked, keeping my voice casual. He said no reports of rats or anything else, but he'd send someone to check. The maintenance guy came, poked around the crawl space, and found nothing: no animals, no leaks, just dirt and dust. I felt silly, but I double-checked the hatch that night, pushing a heavy box of detergent on top for good measure. It helped, for a while. The sounds returned a few nights later, louder this time, more insistent. I woke at 3 a.m., my heart racing, to that same rhythmic tapping, now joined by a faint shuffle, like something moving below. I sat up, clutching my phone, the screen's glow a small comfort in the dark. The laundry room was just down the hall, but it felt miles away. I stayed, in bed, listening, my breath shallow. The sounds stopped just before dawn, leaving a silence that was worstic, expectant, like the house was waiting for me to act. I started avoiding the laundry room at night, doing chores in daylight, the radio blaring to drown out my nerves. But the house felt different now, less mine. I'd catch myself glancing at the hatch, wondering what was down there, what could make those sounds. I'd dream of it sometimes, dark, cramped spaces, eyes watching from the shadows, a hand reaching up through the floor. I'd wake sweating, my heart pounding, and check the hatch again, the padlock still in place, the box unmoved. Then came the night that broke me. It was a Wednesday, rainy and cold, the kind of night that makes you crave warmth and safety. I'd gone to bed early, exhausted from a double shift, the rain a soft lullaby against the windows. I woke at 3 a.m., not to a sound, but to a feeling, a weight in the room, like someone was there. My eyes adjusted to the dark, and I saw it. My bedroom door, always closed at night, was open, just a crack, revealing the hallway beyond. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. I never left it open. I was obsessive about it, a habit from living alone. I lay still, my heart hammering, waiting for an explanation, whined, a draft, anything. Then I heard it, a soft shuffle, like bare feet, on wood, moving closer. My phone was on the nightstand, just out of reach, and I didn't dare move. The shuffle stopped, and I felt it, a presence, standing just beyond the door, watching me. Summoning every ounce of courage, I lunged for my phone, turned on the flashlight, and swung it toward the door. There, crouched on the floor, was a man, gaunt, his eyes wide and unblinking, staring at me like a cornered animal. I screamed, a raw primal sound that tore through the silence, and bolted out of bed, running past him, my bare feet slapping the cold floor. I didn't look back, didn't stop, just ran out the front door, across the wet grass. To my neighbor's house, I pounded on their door, sobbing, barely coherent, until they let me in. They called the police, and I sat on their couch, wrapped in a blanket, shaking as I tried to explain. The officers arrived, searched my house, and found him still there, hiding in the crawl space. He'd made a nest of sorts, a dirty mattress, food wrappers, a flashlight, and a notebook. That notebook was the worst part. It was filled with notes about me, when I left for work, what I wore, what time I ate dinner. Pages of my life, written in a stranger's hand, proof he'd been watching me for days, maybe weeks. The police said the lock on the hatch had been tampered with, easy enough to open from inside. He'd been living there, coming and going through some vent or gap they hadn't checked. They found a list in his notebook, plans they wouldn't share with me, but their faces said enough. I moved out the next week, staying with friends until I found a new place, a bright apartment with no basement, no crawl space. I still don't know how he got in, or how long he was there before I noticed. I don't know what he wanted, though the notebook gave me nightmares for months. What I do know is that safety is a lie, and some threats don't come from the dark, they come from the people who hide in it. Watching, waiting, until the moment you're alone,